It started with a single email, a harmless-looking job application, sitting in the inbox of a Bangladesh bank employee. No alarms, no red flags, just another routine message. But hidden inside, a piece of malware so powerful that it would soon shake the global banking system to its core. Within months, an elite North Korean hacking unit, the Lazarus Group, was inside the bank's network, silently watching, learning, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. When they did, it was unlike anything the world had seen before. They attempted to steal nearly $1 billion from the Federal Reserve. And the scariest part, they almost got away with it. It all started with an email, a simple, harmless-looking message that landed in the inbox of a Bangladesh bank employee in early January 2016. The sender? Someone claiming to be Ras El-Alam, a job applicant submitting his resume. The email contained a link to download his application, and that's where it all began. One click, one download. That's all it took, unbeknownst to the employee. The file contained a highly sophisticated malware designed to silently infiltrate the bank's network. Within minutes, hackers had gained a foothold inside the system, but they weren't in a rush. They were patient. For an entire year, the hackers sat quietly inside Bangladesh Bank's internal network, watching, studying, learning exactly how the bank's SWIFT system, the global messaging network used for international transactions, functioned. Every login, every transaction, every security measure. Their goal? To find the perfect moment to strike. Finally, in February 2016, they made their move. The hackers disabled the bank's SWIFT printer, the only device that printed records of financial transactions. No receipts, no paper trail. And then, while the bank security teams were none the wiser, they began sending fraudulent payment requests to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Their plan? To siphon off nearly $1 billion. But something went wrong. A small detail, a tiny mistake, would unravel their entire operation. It was February 4th, 2016, a Thursday night in Bangladesh. While most of the country slept, the hackers were wide awake. This was D-Day, the moment they had spent over a year preparing for. Using the stolen credentials of bank employees, they accessed SWIFT, the global banking system that handles trillions of dollars in transactions daily. Their plan? To drain nearly $1 billion from Bangladesh Bank's account at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York and funnel the money into various accounts across the world, mainly in Sri Lanka and the Philippines. To avoid detection, they sent the payment request overnight, taking advantage of time zone differences. But before any red flags could be raised, they had disabled the bank's SWIFT printer, ensuring that employees wouldn't immediately see the fraudulent transfers. By early Friday morning in New York, the Federal Reserve had received 35 payment orders from Bangladesh Bank, totaling a staggering $951 million. Since the transactions came through the trusted SWIFT network, they were automatically processed without suspicion. For a brief moment, it seemed like the hackers had pulled it off. But then, a tiny mistake ruined everything. One of the payment orders mentioned a recipient's address on Jupiter Street. That small detail triggered an alert because Jupiter was also the name of a sanctioned Iranian oil tanker. This seemingly minor coincidence caused the Federal Reserve to manually review the transactions. By the time the dust settled, 30 of the 35 transactions were blocked. But it wasn't a total failure. The hackers still managed to steal $101 million before anyone realized what had happened. Now, the real question was, where did the money go? With $101 million successfully stolen, the hackers now had one job: to make the money disappear before anyone could trace it back to them. Out of the stolen amount, $20 million was sent to an account in Sri Lanka, registered under a fake NGO. But luck wasn't on the hackers' side. A simple spelling mistake in the transfer details, where they wrote foundation instead of foundation, raised suspicion. Sri Lankan authorities flagged the transaction and eventually froze the funds. That was a loss for the hackers. But the remaining $81 million, that money was successfully funneled into multiple bank accounts in the Philippines, specifically in Manila. And here's where things got even more interesting. Instead of wiring the money to offshore accounts, the hackers used casinos to launder it. Why casinos? Because in the Philippines, casinos aren't covered under anti-money laundering laws. This meant that once the stolen money entered the system, it was almost impossible to track. The hackers converted the funds into casino chips, played high-stakes games like Baccarat, and then cashed out their winnings, effectively washing away all traces of the theft. Some reports suggest that stacks of cash, weighing over 300 kilograms, were handed over to a Chinese middleman who quickly left the country on a private jet. Meanwhile, Bangladesh Bank was still in the dark. Their system had been sabotaged so efficiently that it took them 5 days to realize they had been robbed. By then, The money had already disappeared. But as investigators began piecing things together, a name kept appearing: Lazarus Group. And that changed everything. As investigators dug deeper, one name kept surfacing: Lazarus Group. This wasn't just any hacking syndicate. It was a state-backed cybercrime unit with direct ties to North Korea. Lazarus had a reputation. They weren't in it for personal gain. They were allegedly working for the North Korean government, funding a regime cut off from most of the global financial system. The UN had imposed strict economic sanctions on North Korea, making it nearly impossible for the country to access international banking. So, instead of waiting for money, they stole it. The FBI and cybersecurity experts traced the Bangladesh bank hackback to Lazarus using digital fingerprints left in the malware. The same techniques have been used in previous cyber attacks, including the Sony Pictures hack in 2014, where Lazarus retaliated against a movie that mocked North Korea's leader. And here's the chilling part. This was just one of many cyber heists. Over the years, Lazarus has stolen billions of dollars, targeting banks, cryptocurrency platforms, and even individual users. This heist wasn't just a cybercrime. It was economic warfare. And it showed the world just how dangerous a keyboard in the wrong hands could be. When the dust settled, the Bangladesh bank had lost $81 million, a fraction of the $1 billion the hackers originally aimed for. But the real damage wasn't just financial. It was the exposed vulnerabilities of global banking security. Authorities in Bangladesh, the US, the Philippines, and Sri Lanka scrambled to recover the stolen money. But tracing digital currency laundering through shell accounts and underground casinos was like chasing a ghost. In the Philippines, investigators tracked $50 million to casinos in Manila. The hackers had exploited a loophole. Casinos in the country weren't covered by anti-money laundering laws at the time. They turned the stolen money into casino chips, gambled it away in high-stakes baccarat games, and cashed it out as clean winnings. By the time authorities stepped in, the money had already vanished into offshore accounts. Meanwhile, $20 million sent to a fake Sri Lankan charity was flagged due to a spelling mistake. The hackers had typed foundation as foundation. That tiny error led to the money being frozen. Despite international pressure, most of the stolen funds were never recovered. North Korea denied involvement, but cybersecurity experts were convinced this was Lazarus Group's doing. In the end, the hack exposed a terrifying reality. A nation under economic sanctions had turned to cybercrime as a business model. And this was just the beginning. Lazarus wasn't done yet. If there's one name that keeps intelligence agencies awake at night, it's Lazarus Group. Officially, North Korea denies their existence. But cybersecurity experts, law enforcement, and even the FBI have linked them to some of the biggest cyber heists in history. Their mission? To fund a sanctioned regime by any means necessary. From bank heists to ransomware attacks, Lazarus operates like a state-sponsored criminal empire, funneling stolen wealth directly into North Korea's nuclear weapons program. Their fingerprints were all over the Bangladesh bank hack. But that was just one operation in a long list of cyber assaults. In 2014, they allegedly hacked Sony Pictures in retaliation for a movie that mocked North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. That attack wiped entire servers and leaked confidential emails, shaking Hollywood to its core. Then came WannaCry in 2017, a global ransomware attack that crippled hospitals, businesses, and government agencies in over 150 countries. The attack caused billions in damages, demanding payment in Bitcoin, which conveniently disappeared into Lazarus-controlled wallets. In 2022, they pulled off the biggest crypto heist ever, stealing $620 million from the Ronin network, a blockchain platform linked to the popular game Axie Infinity. Despite sanctions and crackdowns, Lazarus remains untouchable. Cybercrime has become North Korea's economic lifeline, and with billions flowing through digital channels, their operations are only getting bigger and more sophisticated. The Bangladesh bank hack wasn't just a crime, it was a warning. If an entire nation is backing cybercriminals, what's stopping them from shutting down financial systems, stealing state secrets, or even disrupting critical infrastructure? The world isn't just dealing with hackers anymore. It's dealing with a cyber army. For all their sophistication, the hackers made one small but disastrous mistake: a simple spelling error. When Lazarus Group sent out their fraudulent SWIFT payment orders, they meticulously crafted the details, routing funds across international accounts. Their plan was working flawlessly, until they misspelled one word. One of the payment instructions was to send $20 million to a Sri Lankan nonprofit named Shalika Foundation. But instead of writing foundation, they typed foundation. It was a tiny mistake, but in the world of high-stakes banking, even the smallest error can raise red flags. The typo caught the attention of a bank employee in Sri Lanka, who found it suspicious. They flagged the transaction, paused the transfer, and contacted the authorities. That typo saved Bangladesh Bank from losing millions more. But it wasn't the only issue that tipped off investigators. At the same time, another anomaly was raising eyebrows in the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. The bank had already processed 5 transactions, transferring $101 million to various accounts linked to the hackers. But when they reviewed 30 more payment orders, totaling nearly $850 million, they noticed something strange. One of the recipient addresses was Jupiter Street. That triggered an alert because Jupiter happened to match the name of a sanctioned Iranian oil tanker. Due to strict compliance regulations, this prompted an additional security check, delaying the transactions. By the time investigators in Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and the U.S. started connecting the dots, Lazarus Group's grand plan was already falling apart. Their dream of stealing $1 billion, ruined by a spelling mistake. In the aftermath of the heist, the hackers managed to make off with $81 million, but the trail quickly went cold. Here's where the money ended up. $31 million was handed over to a Chinese middleman in the Philippines, but it vanished without a trace, likely laundered through various channels. The remaining $50 million was laundered through casinos in Manila. The hackers turned the stolen funds into chips, gambled with them, and then cashed out, slowly siphoning the money into untraceable accounts. Even today, a significant portion of the stolen money remains unaccounted for, hidden behind a complex web of transactions and false identities. The heist's incredible precision and the dark methods used to cover their tracks have left investigators with few clues to follow.